Coming to you from a cozy little condo high atop Old Fourth Ward, Atlanta. Welcome to The Ron Show on America One Radio. Here's your host, Ron Roberts.
All right, happy hump day. A week ago today, we were sad to even wake up. Were we not? I mean, I don't know about you guys, but when I woke up the following day, last Wednesday, I was like, does life have to go on? We didn't get hit by an asteroid. Something didn't just make the world implode upon itself in my sleep. And a week later, we're still trying to ascertain what it was that got us to where we are with yet another loss to Donald Trump, who had, by the way, been on quite a losing streak prior to last Tuesday. He lost ground in his 2018 midterms, famously lost the 2020 election, although he still doesn't believe he did. The red wave didn't come in 2022. He endorsed a ton of candidates over the years that just, he had the reverse Midas touch. And then 2024 happened. And we're all trying to diagnose how that came to be. If you've listened to this show over the course of the last week or so, you know that a constant theme that I keep coming back to is a media ecosystem to match that of the right-wing media ecosystem. Talk radio, 3, 4 cable ventures, cable TV news, I use air quotes, sources. You saw our new Secretary of Defense plucked right from Fox and Friends. Joe Biden was being mocked by Fox News for plucking various pundits and talking heads from other news outlets. Fox News has nothing but glowing things to say about Secretary Pete, a new Secretary Pete. Damn it. Secretary of Defense, Secretary Pete. Should he be confirmed? So that is a theme of mine that I will continue to rail on and stick to. And I think a lot of folks to the center and left actually agree on that point. There has to be some sort of a coalescing of messaging, the difference being we have facts and math and data and science, logic, all on our side. We don't have to craft narratives. We just have to craft messaging and craft the machinery that delivers the messaging to a majority of the American people. But I also have been sort of circling the plane, ready to land a runway on another theory. Actually, it's not a theory. It's in plain sight, if you ask me. And I'm going to touch on this a little bit today and a good bit tomorrow. It is, to me, a theory that, again, it's just right there in plain sight. The radicalization of white men, particularly young white men. I believe that this is something that is a danger. We've seen the uprise in white nationalism, and the FBI has determined that white supremacy is the gravest threat to American security, our greatest terror threat. It's all right there in front of us. Harvesting the energy from that in a way that is politically expedient, however. Well, that's something that the MAGA movement has been able to do. Uranium can be dangerous, right? It can also power tens of thousands or millions of homes. It's all in how you use it. Although I would tell you that there's no good that can come from white supremacy. None. Or white nationalism. Tomorrow on the show, returning guest, Dante King, author of the book, The 400-Year Holocaust, White America's Legal, Psychopathic, and Sociopathic, am I saying that right? Sociopathic Black Genocide and the Revolt Against Critical Race Theory. That is a long title for a book. Just go with The 400-Year Holocaust. That'll work, okay? Anyway, Dante will join the show tomorrow. We're going to talk a good bit about this theory that I have, that white men, and particularly younger white men, are becoming radicalized. This isn't like a left-right problem either. Joe Rogan, RFK Jr., Elon Musk, they all profess to have been Democrats before. Pro-choice, pro-pot, pro-gay marriage. They're, for all intents and purposes, liberals, right? They've also been radicalized. The question is, what pushed them? With Joe Rogan, it seems like it's, DEI, discomfort with trans issues, RFK Jr., and sour grapes. He wasn't taken seriously as a Democratic candidate, and also an aversion to vaccines. Elon Musk, well, he has a trans child that he has no relationship with anymore because the trans child wishes for there to be no relationship with Elon Musk. Obviously, he's also insanely wealthy and wanting to hoard as much of that as possible, and that tends to make one more conservative fiscally. Anyway, each have unique reasons for having been radicalized, but young white men, many of them liberal on key issues, as I've mentioned before, have become alarmingly radicalized, and this is a conversation that needs to be had. The issues that I think drive this radicalization include immigration, DEI in particular, and that's where Dante King comes in the conversation for tomorrow's show, and trans rights. I mean, think about it. The breadcrumbs are all there before us. Kid Rock shooting up a suitcase of Bud Light over a trans influencer getting a gift batch of cans with her face on it. That drove Kid Rock batshit crazy. You had pushback throughout the country against companies with DEI initiatives, forcing companies, many of them, to balk and scale back said initiatives. You had constant and persistent fears, and in many cases, realities, of folks losing blue-collar jobs to an undocumented immigrant. I mean, even the assassination attempt on Donald Trump, the first one, and the unmistakable reality that so many mass shooters are young white boys or men, those are clues. We've got a white male radicalization problem in this country, and it's bleeding over into what I call passable, as white, Hispanic men, and even the occasional black man too. So this is a conversation that you're going to hear a lot more of on this show. I'm just warning you. Strap in because it may not be comfortable. I'm a white man. I happen to be a gay white man. I happen to believe that my being gay actually provides me a little bit of insight into being not part of that club, and also attuned me to, having a stronger empathy muscle, being able to empathize with marginalized people. I'm also not wealthy. See, that's the other thing. There are wealthy white gay men who love the GOP, love Elon Musk, Donald Trump. It comes down to fiscal self-interests, usually. But honestly, something that I saw Jon Stewart talking about on The Daily Show the other day is something that I want to reiterate with him, and that's in speaking to those of us who think from a center-left or progressive left mindset against retreating on issues and causes that we say we support, or positions that we've taken that we believe to our core are the right positions to take. From the Monday Daily Show, roll the audio.
But it's a delight to hear about why it happened from so many people who were so wrong about what was going to happen. And everyone has their own pet theory. But there's one theory that a lot of people seem to be coalescing around.
They were too woke, insisting that people use the term Latinx.
Too far to the left on transgender rights.
You have to say they. No, you have to do this.
Stop with the virtue signaling.
Step away from woke. Focus less on who is woke and more on who is broke.
Social justice issues take a back seat when your son is in the basement vaping and playing video games and can't find a job.
Okay, that actually sounds like one of my nephews, but...
I feel like that last guy was really venting more about his son. Everyone's talking about this wokeness theory, from cable news to the op-ed section. I only have one problem with the woke theory. I just didn't recall seeing any Democrats running on woke shit.
That part. Once again, our candidates let their opposition caricaturize what being a liberal, what being a progressive, or a Democrat means, and even worse, didn't respond to it.
These were the commercials I saw for the Democrats.
Sherrod Brown is working to fix our border crisis.
Mondaire Jones is working to secure our border.
Pat Ryan is restoring order at our southern border.
I'm Laura Gillen, and I'm here at the border of Nassau County. We're 2,000 miles from Mexico, but we're feeling the migrant crisis almost every day.
In Nassau County, by the way, Suffolk County, make my day. You want a piece of our strip malls? You're going to have to go through Laura Gillen. Those are the Democrats. The Democrats. I gave the police more money than they even wanted. I gave them planes and tanks. I built a moat around the country and filled it with alligators and chlamydia. They didn't talk about pronouns. They didn't say Latin X. It was the opposite.
We can't let China steal Wisconsin jobs.
Benefits for illegal immigrants? No way. Blocking support for white farmers? I mean, look at me.
Standing with law enforcement against defunding the police.
I've owned a gun my whole life.
Let me be clear. I don't want boys playing girls' sports.
You all know me. I've never pushed for sex changes.
Well, that's just a weird one at the end there. Come on, guys, you know me. He's like George Bailey in It's a Wonderful Life. I'm not the guy who pushes sex. I'm in your shops every day. Mary, it's me, George Bailey. I'm not trying to get you to get a sex change. I'm just wishing I was dead. And don't forget about Kamala Harris. It's not like she was exactly waving around her NPR tote bag.
I have a Glock.
They didn't do the woke thing. They tried. They acted like Republicans for the last 4 months. They wore camo hats and went to Cheney family reunions. Do you know how dangerous it is to wear a hunting hat around Cheney's? You have any idea? Thought I had one more rip in me. I didn't. Democrats were mostly running against an identity that was defined for them, based on a couple of months of post-George Floyd defund the police, Me Too Instagram posts from 4 years ago. What happened was the country felt like government wasn't working for them. And the Democrats in particular were taking their hard-earned money and giving it to people who didn't deserve it as much as them. And so the Democrats got shellacked. I'm sure any robust examination of better policies is very welcome. But I just want to please assure people, this isn't forever. This is the map in 1984 when Ronald Reagan won. That's the map. The only state the Democrats won was Minnesota. Yeah. Everyone thought that's the end of the Democrats. But 8 years later, there was a Democrat back in office. We don't know what's going to happen in 4 years at all. The only thing that is certain is this.
You all know me. I've never pushed for sex changes.
But this is something I will say to Democrats. Do not retreat on issues that you say were important to you prior to the election, thinking that retreating on those issues, giving up on, I don't know, a marginalized subset of the American population, don't think that giving up on them, abandoning them, is going to grow your party. I'm speaking specifically when it comes, by the way, to trans issues, because A, I'm part of the alphabet mafia. Remember, I'm a G. I'm part of the G in the LGBTQI+. And I think there's more letters to it now. I'm 50. I don't think I should have to keep up with that anymore. I'm in the camp. I get a pass, right? I was just saying. I understand what it's like for, again, the empathy muscle, for someone to be transgender in this world, in society. It's not easy. It's not an easy choice to make. It's not something that anyone wishes on themselves. Hell, Caitlyn Jenner all but said, being trans is too tough. Yeah, it is. It's very tough. So being trans, or someone who is trans, the trans community needs allies, not abandonment. And using them and their plight as scapegoats for why Democrats lost is repugnant. It is repulsive. It is absolute bullshit, and I'm going to call it out every time I hear someone left of center try and use that as a rationale for why Kamala Harris, Tim Walz, Democrats up and down the ballot lost. It's not because of trans issues. It's because of a radicalization, because there is now more awareness of the existence of the trans community. And if you want to lose another marginalized community that you should be able to count on for support because you're supporting them, well, abandon that support and find out where they may take their votes. And it shouldn't even be about counting votes. It should be about doing the right damn thing and staying steadfast in saying we're going to do the right damn thing. That is what wins over hearts and minds. That's what grows the base. Sticking to what you know is right is the right way to grow the party. Full stop. Back after this. The Ron Show on America One Radio, Progressive Voices via TuneIn, or if you're listening via podcast, thank you for doing that. Incidentally, you can follow The Ron Show on your preferred social media platforms at Ron Show ATL. We are now on Blue Sky. Woo woo. I, in fact, decided I had like 4 Twitter accounts for various reasons. One personal, one for the show, one for real estate, killed that one, and another for a podcast venture that I was going to launch into that I've not decided I'm not going to do. I'm going to do it. I just haven't gotten around to it. Anyway, I killed 2 of the 4 accounts. The personal one I keep. Why do I keep? Oh, I've got connections on there that I just need to eventually know that I'm leaving, and then I'm going to leave it too. I'm sticking on the Twitter X platform at Ron Show ATL, though, because I just kind of want to keep my eye on things. You know what I'm saying? Got to keep your eye on the crazies on the other side. And there's this wild rumor now that the Twitter X platform and Truth Social are going to merge. Okay. That'll just make it, a la crazier. But that's fine. I want to keep my eye on it. Anyway, you can follow the Ron Show at Ron Show ATL. Blue Sky, Facebook, Twitter X, if you're still there. Instagram, Threads, that's where we are. Talking a little bit about the whole wokeness crutch pointing towards embracing the trans community as a reason why Democrats lost. I think it's utter bullshit. And I think one of the reasons why Democrats lose support and get folks who are disillusioned with the party over time is for this very sort of waffling. We can't waffle on what we know is right, okay? And we spent way too much time playing on defense when it comes to being accused of things that, again, as Jon Stewart pointed out in The Daily Show, we weren't even running about. Wasn't part of our, nobody's talking about mutilating children because it doesn't happen. We don't, again, we let fantasy or outrageousness or hyperbole leave the barn, the lie, before the truth puts its pants on, or pantsuit or skirt or whatever. Sorry, I'm just low-hanging fruit. That's not happening. There's not gender, genital mutilation going on with kids. There is, mounds of evidence and a global scientific and medical community that supports the trans community, and It's a lot like, honestly, abortion. Again, an issue that Democrats went on, and look at them. They stuck to it, and it's just not working for them at the ballot box, as we saw. But I think it's because of, other factors, the economy, and again, radicalization of a subset of a large voting bloc of this country. But demonizing trans people or giving up on trans people isn't how you grow the party. And we've let the term woke become, much like the word liberal was in the 90s with, again, talk radio and cable news. It became a dirty word. There's nothing wrong with being woke. It's about being aware. It's about being empathetic. It's about being compassionate. If being woke is a problem, if all of that is a problem, then I don't want to know you and I don't want to associate with you. And that's how we have to frame it. No, we want to be woke. We want to promote wokeness, honestly. And it's time we start doing that instead of running from it. Back after this, it's The Ron Show.
Broadcasting 5 days a week to make common sense common again. This is The Ron Show on America One Radio.
One of the common sense things that doesn't make any sense these days is how Joe Rogan, of all people, has become so influential societally and politically. It beggars an explanation. But this is one of the reasons why I come back to this theory sometimes. There's a glitch in the matrix. Are we not really alive? Are we living through a quirk in the video game that we live in? I mean, what is happening? Is this some alternate, reality that we have shifted into, some sort of portal that we walk through that, oops, we need to go back? Any of us who grew up in the era where Donald Trump was the goofball, wealthy, everything gilded, covered in gold, opulent, nonsensical, bombastic, all of these things about him never once made him look like leadership material, like presidential in any way. And we've learned so much more about him since then. The facade is gone. Like, we know who and what he is now, and he somehow is presidential now. It defies logic. Much like Joe Rogan defies logic. Joe Rogan played a TV character on a sitcom that really wasn't all that good. Was it the news radio with Phil Hartman? Like, he was just a bit character. Wasn't even one of the top actors. It wasn't like he was Jennifer Aniston or Matthew Perry on Friends. He just had this occasional role on a sitcom. Next thing you know, he is the host of a reality show called Fear Factor. And those of us who watch Fear Factor from time to time would either be grossed out, icked out, scared, or all three. Joe Rogan was the host of that. Joe Rogan got in on the ground floor when podcasting became a thing. And it wasn't even so much that he wanted to be a societal barometer or even politically motivated. He was somebody who people kind of sort of knew from Fear Factor, and he decided, I got nothing else going on. Like, literally, he had nothing else going on. Career-wise, nothing else. And a few $100s and some equipment, and he can do a podcast. And he just kind of stumbled into this. And now he has Patricia Murphy writes in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, the Walter Cronkite. Are you kidding me? The Walter Cronkite of 2024. Murphy writing, I will include this in the show notes at ronshowatl.com. It says just about everything you need to know about the state of the media industry and politics in 2024 to realize that the most consequential interview that President-elect Donald Trump did this cycle may not have been with a major network or news personality, but with the podcaster Joe Rogan. Rogan is the muscled-up 57-year-old stand-up comic and mixed martial arts aficionado whose podcast, The Joe Rogan Experience, is the most popular in the country. His audience is so massive that when he interviewed Trump 2 weeks before Election Day, the 3-hour conversation had 49 million views on YouTube, more than the total number of people who watched the entirety of election night coverage on any cable or broadcast news network. Because of his immense reach, Rogan and other podcasters like him are considered part of the reason that Trump's performance among young men jumped 8 points since the 2020 election, according to network exit polls. It's a theory. And it kind of plays into my theory about the radicalization of younger white men in this country, which I will elaborate on throughout the show and subsequent episodes of the show. While Vice President Kamala Harris, courted young female influencers, none had the impact of Rogan and his friends, who offer up hours-long conversations with guests on everything from food supplements to tattoos to politics and mixed martial arts. Although the vice president was apparently in talks to appear on Rogan's show, her campaign said scheduling conflicts made it impossible. Trump, on the other hand, made the time. Patricia Murphy continues, it's hard to say whether the Rogan-Trump confluence was the cause or the effect of Trump's noticeably amped up rallies and events in Georgia this year. But the audiences seem to be noticeably younger than in 2000, with loads of college students coming out to cheer for Trump or just see what he was all about. Patricia Murphy writes, when I asked a group of Georgia Tech students where they had heard about Trump for the first time in detail, they all had the same answer: from Joe Rogan's podcast. To get a better idea of how the bromance began, Patricia Murphy writes, I did a deep dive over the weekend into what reporters lately have been calling the manosphere, namely podcasts from Rogan, Theo Von, and a host of other male comedians, athletes, and actors whose programs Trump has appeared on. The idea itself wasn't some stroke of campaign genius. Instead, Trump told Theo Von that his 18-year-old son, Barron, is a fan. By the way, Theo Von, another one. He was on a reality, was it Road Rules? I think it was Road Rules on MTV. Wasn't well liked on the show, wasn't really, but he parlayed that into a budding stand-up comedy career. I mean, I followed Theo on social media for a long time because I thought his stand-up comedy was kind of funny. And it just kind of blossomed into this. Like when I saw Theo Von interviewing Bernie Sanders, I'm like, wait a minute, that guy from that MTV reality series is now a big enough deal that he's interviewing Bernie freaking Sanders? And he's part of this manosphere. Patricia Murphy continues. In between ads for Call of Duty and conversations about cocaine use, I had expected to hear the same hard-charging Trump from his rallies where he mocks and insults Democrats, the media, moderate Republicans, women, immigrants, and any other group for his complaints about. But what listeners heard instead were lengthy, sometimes thoughtful conversations with Trump and other guests about topics that traditional newscasts rarely delve into. His interview with Rogan covered everything from what it was like for Trump to walk into the White House for the first time to whether there is life on Mars and why he continues to claim the 2020 election was stolen. How do you think you were robbed? Everybody always cuts you off, Rogan said. Rogan did not push back on Trump's false claims about the election, but he did push him on the environmental damage from fossil fuels. But there are legitimate concerns about environmental impact, correct? The tone was friendly, often personal, sometimes inaccurate, and very comfortable. Essentially the opposite of a news interview, and audiences flocked to it, Patricia Murphy writes. In an interview with Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Rogan explained why he doesn't feel the need to correct his guests, even if what they are saying is wrong. Rogan saying, you can put people in front of people. They might not even be right. They might be wrong, he said, but at least now you're having a conversation. By the way, this is where I point out, Joe Rogan is no conservative firebrand. He's not ideologically right on many key issues. In fact, I was listening to an NPR piece on the media over the weekend. Let me see if I can find the audio where they have cuts of audio of Joe Rogan saying all kinds of very liberal things.
Even as he hosted buddy-buddy interviews with Alex Jones, Ben Shapiro, Jordan Peterson, and the like, he was still reaching a politically diverse audience, and he was saying stuff like this on his show.
I think I'll probably vote for Bernie. Him as a human being, when I was hanging out with him, and I believe in him. I like him.
Look at you, progressive.
Yeah, well, I've always been.
You hear that?
What?
Yeah.
Everyone says you're a right-winger.
I've never voted right-wing in my life.
See?
Really?
Never. I voted Democrat except for independent. I voted for Gary Johnson because he did my podcast.
Rogan in 2020, part of a montage of clips that resurfaced on social media this week.
87% of scientists said that human activity is driving global warming. I'm very pro-choice. I'm very women's rights, civil rights, gay rights, trans rights. I'm even universal health care. Obviously, this protected status is driving me crazy. This thing that Trump's doing with children that were born in other countries and then brought over here as children, and then they're talking about
So how did Rogan the liberal end up endorsing Donald Trump?
Good question.
I've heard several explanations. One is that Rogan gave up on the Democrats after they dumped Bernie Sanders in 2020. Another is that he's been slowly red-pilled by his guests.
When someone keeps on saying, I'm a liberal, and then people with whom he talks speak incessantly about the evils of cancel culture, who talk about how the mainstream media is suppressive and so on and so forth, then you're not actually a liberal, you're wearing a costume. And I think what's happened over the past 5 years is Rogan has finally taken off that costume and revealed himself for who he was all along.
Since 2020, Joe Rogan has become a lightning rod for controversy and criticism. The kind of scrutiny that comes with the territory when you're the most popular podcaster in the world.
Listen to this.
There was that time a couple years ago when he had to apologize after the internet discovered that he'd used the N-word repeatedly in old episodes.
Look, I can't go back in time and change what I've said. I wish I could. Obviously, that's not possible. But I do hope that this can be a teachable moment for anybody that doesn't realize how offensive that word can be coming out of a white person's mouth, in context or out of context. My sincere and humble apologies.
There was his interview with so-called vaccine skeptic Dr. Robert Malone.
These mandates of an experimental vaccine are explicitly illegal. They are explicitly inconsistent with the Nuremberg Code. They're explicitly inconsistent with the Belmont Report.
Over 1,000 doctors, scientists, and health professionals are calling out Spotify over false claims about COVID aired by its most popular podcaster, Joe Rogan.
Rogan would double down on the vax stuff and even went on to sort of endorse his friend RFK Jr. after he came on the podcast. And then there was this.
Ready for this? My friend, his wife, is a school teacher. And she works at a school that had to install a litter box in the girls' room because there is a girl who's a furry who identifies as an animal.
He had to walk back this totally bogus story in 2022, saying he must have misunderstood his friend or something. More recently, he told a guest that Joe Biden faked the State of the Union address.
The State of the Union was not live. And
yes, it was.
No. Did you see that they found out that it wasn't? Someone zoomed in on his watch, and his watch was the wrong time.
How could that even be? I don't think all the Republicans would agree to it, too.
Who knows what they knew? They're all there live while he's doing it?
Yeah.
Rogan had his producer do a mid-interview fact check. They pulled up an article debunking a photoshopped image of Biden's watch.
Yeah, there is a fake image. They got me.
How do you fall for this stuff? It's been pointed out by many of his critics that Rogan doesn't seem to prepare enough for his interviews. He exercises poor judgment. Rogan says he's a victim of cancel culture. I think that's a big reason why he likes Trump.
There's probably no one in history that I've ever seen that's been attacked the way you've been attacked and the way they've done it, so coordinated and systematically. When you see those,
this is how Rogan set up his 3-hour interview with Donald Trump last week, by telling their shared story about the media and the political establishment. They hate us, not because of our behavior, but because we threaten them.
Did you just assume because people loved you on The Apprentice, they were going to love you as a president?
I figured it would be so easy. You know, it's very
it probably
interesting.
would have been if the media didn't attack you the way they did. If they didn't conflate you with Hitler. I mean, even today, like Kamala was talking about you and Hitler. They're going to take what you said about Robert E.
We'll
Lee.
never know whether Rogan's endorsement moved the needle on Tuesday, whether Kamala Harris's appearance would have made any difference. But all the spilled ink about it this week says a lot about where it feels like political influence is headed.
Getting back to Patricia Murphy's piece on this very subject, his interviews on Vaughn's What Happened This Weekend, talking about Donald Trump, had 14 million views. Compare that to CNN's total daily ratings one day this week of about 600,000 viewers. That hour-long interview from Trump's club in Bedminster, New Jersey, included a lengthy conversation about addiction, including Trump describing his older brother's struggle with alcoholism as the reason he never smoked or consumed alcohol. He was very wise, Trump said of his brother. He warned me. When Theo Von talked about using cocaine in the past, Trump asked him if it was a good feeling. No, it's horrible, Vaughn said. So why would you do it? Trump asked. What you might be asking, does any of this have to do with being president? Nothing and everything, Patricia Murphy writes. In an era when voters can Google nearly any fact or figure, the one thing that's harder than ever to know is what a candidate is really like. Who are they beyond their resume, their image or attack ads? What motivates them? Can you trust them? This is where I come back to Democrats letting their opposition caricaturize them. Why I implore the Stacey Abrams of the world to leave the blue bubbles and go out to rural Georgia and meet voters who may think something of you that has been mocked up and made up by your opponents so that they can learn, oh, she's actually kind of a nice lady. And you know what? She said some things that I actually agree with. Yeah, the thawing begins, right? Murphy concludes her piece. A listener could easily have walked away from Trump's 3-hour interview with Rogan, inaccuracies and all, and felt like he knew him, or they felt like they knew him better than they ever would have before the podcast. And plenty decided that, yes, they wanted to vote for him too. Which candidate wouldn't want to skip the hard news questions and spend 3 hours that way instead? Political media may never be the same, she writes. I'll include this in the show notes at ronshowatl.com. I still happen to believe that this sort of offering of podcasts and discussions, the Theo Vaughns, the Joe Rogans of the world, I think we're starting to hear some of the insights into how there is a radicalization of a voting bloc that's happening that Democrats need to be able to respond to in a way that is substantive and fact-based before this gets out of hand. Because we all see the breadcrumbs, the tea leaves. It can get out of hand, and it can get ugly. We already have evidence of that ugliness rearing its head in our discourse and societally as well. Back after this, The Ron Show on America One Radio. Final few minutes of The Ron Show, and incidentally, I should have done this. And I will include the On the Media link at ronshowatl.com so you can listen to that full episode from this past weekend entitled The Manosphere Celebrates a Win Plus M. Gesser on How to Survive an Autocracy. The voice you heard, the host that you heard in the segment that I played, was Micah Lowinger, who worked along with Brooke Gladstone and executive producer Katya Rogers to discuss how the Rogan Experience and Theo Vaughn and other influencers in the mostly male spectrum are stirring the drink a little bit. And we'll talk more about that and how I believe what you heard. I surmised early on that I thought maybe Rogan was moved by trans issues. Maybe I'm wrong about that. He actually spoke rather glowingly, again, of a lot of liberal causes. And yet he still voted for Donald Trump. And for him, it came down to cancel culture, which I almost sort of understand. I pause when I say that because let me let you into the background a little bit here. I'm a 25-year radio broadcast veteran myself. I felt at times, one in particular that comes to mind, very early in my career, the potential for being canceled. I was doing morning radio in my hometown of Augusta, Georgia. This is in the mid-'90s. And me being a proud graduate of Harlem High School, Harlem, Georgia. Back-to-back state baseball champions, by the way. And suddenly, over the last 4 or 5 years, a really good football program. When I was a kid, that was not the case. My 4 years, they won 8 games total. 2 years, over. 5-5 1 year and 3-7. I mean, they were not a good football program. So when I came back after college, working on the radio, somebody heard something and surmised this. Again, this is all before digitization or even I don't have an air check of it. Somebody surmised that I had said something negative about my high school, my alma mater's football team. And I didn't. I mean, I was in my 20s. I wasn't the brightest guy on the planet, but I wasn't going to say something negative about my audience and my alma mater, right? It just didn't make sense. But again, a lie gets halfway around the world before the truth puts its pants on, right? Anyway, somebody thought they'd heard something and it got to the coach and the coach went around the hallways. It wasn't true. But I could have been canceled for that. I mean, it's a small school, just a minor blip of the audience in the market I worked in. But I understand what it's like if I had said something wrong and had lost my job over it. Or in radio, you lose your job, for all sorts of reasons anyway. You're always walking that tightrope. And so I kind of understand the pushback to cancel culture. I believe what people should do, however, is when they're called out for saying something or doing something that is aghast, learn from it instead of being defensive about it. And maybe then you won't be canceled. Just a thought. But I also think that this white male radicalization comes from a number of factors, cancel culture being one of them. And listen, let's not make a mistake here. The right is just as bad about cancel culture as the left. And nobody calls them on it. Well, not nobody. Not enough people call them on it. That would be my push. If I were ever invited on the Joe Rogan Experience, I'd be like, yeah, I get it. Cancel culture drove you to Donald Trump. It made you sort of empathetic with him, like you related to him. At the same time, that's what they do too. And you literally heard Joe Rogan say he voted for Gary Johnson, Libertarian, because Gary Johnson came on the show. Okay, well, that's a dumb reason to endorse somebody. I mean, Marianne Williamson came on this podcast, and I still didn't vote for Marianne Williamson in the Georgia primary. It's just, but again, I've never said that Joe Rogan is a bright man. In fact, I think I've said quite the opposite. It baffles the mind that a not bright guy who gets corrected on the podcast all the time by his producers when he runs afoul of facts. He's not a smart guy. He just kind of tripped into this, but he's making good hay with it. And now he is, as Patricia Murphy writes in the AJC, the Walter Cronkite of 2024. But I also think this radicalization of the white male voter comes from DEI, which is an affront to their vision of what being successful is. Immigration, blue-collar jobs, coming for those blue-collar jobs with lower paid immigrant labor. Instead of blaming the person or persons or company that does that, they blame a political movement that they believe allows the immigrant to come in unabated. So there's economic concerns when it comes to DEI and immigration. You can lump those two together in that concern. I would argue that, sometimes it's just about your own mediocrity, but nobody wants to hear that, especially from an aspiring leader, a politician. But sometimes it has to be said. I mean, we see those memes all the time, right? If you're worried about someone coming into this country to take your fruit picking job or your food processing job, maybe look inward. But those who have crafts, plumbing, electricians, construction, it's a fair argument to make. But this is where Democrats fail to also point out, listen, this isn't just our fault, okay? Folks are going to come to this country because of all of the things that make people come to this country in the first place or leave their home country. There are economic issues. We have, tariffed and blockaded folks into poverty and strife and struggle in Central and South American countries. The effects of climate change, our comfort and lifestyle have caused a lot of climate change issues that send people over. But also, it's not like the Republican Party is doing a damn thing about people hiring people who are undocumented immigrants either. Because a lot of those people are GOP donors. They're wealthy. That's how people get rich. They avoid paying for things when at all possible. Which comes back to messaging and comes back to the fact that there is not a left-wing version of the right-wing ecosystem. All right. Dante King, author of the 400-Year Holocaust, joins the show tomorrow to talk more about this. And Donald Trump wants to give reparations to white people? I heard it and it blew my mind. I know Dante's got some thoughts. I will as well. That is tomorrow. 9 to 10 a.m., 5 to 6 p.m. on the America One radio app, AmericaOneRadio.com, 11 p.m. to midnight at Progressive Voices via TuneIn, or wherever you podcast. Show notes at RonShowATL.com. Have yourself a great Wednesday. We'll see you tomorrow.